What did we decide? You're an aficionado of Shakespeare? Is what we decided? Okay.
Yeah. I've studied and loved for a very long time. We've had a long-term relationship, Will and I. He's the most reliable man I've ever been with. He's always there whenever I reach for him on the shelf.
Over here.
Oh, you're cheating on me! Each piece, each character has their own point of view.
Yeah.
And so each character is going to say something that is a worldview from their own perspective. And then there are the ones you're talking about, which are like the ones that we've held on to in our own experience a lot. But, you know, it's hard to just kind of point and go, right there. That right there is the whole meaning of life. The only thing is, because Shakespeare wrote about the human condition, although arguably I don't know that he necessarily knew that's what he was doing, but as a playwright, as an actor, as a studier of humans, we have decided that he wrote about the human condition, which means that he was writing about what we feel, what we know, what we think, what we do, why we do things, all of that. So just to kind of boil it down to a few themes, I think is difficult, because there are as many themes as there are thoughts that we have, and there are as many points of view as there are words, you know? So I think it's difficult to kind of boil it down and say that Shakespeare meant this. Although each one of us who studies Shakespeare knows that he meant exactly what I think he means.
Oh,
because that's the other thing too about translation. There's the folio, which is essentially the first folio, which is essentially his writing that was then transcribed by the typesetters of the day. So they would, he would hand his scribbles, it's a terrible thing to say, but his writing over to the printer, who had an apprentice, and one or the other of them was reading his notes, his handwritten in, ink on a feather quill, scratches, and saying, okay, this sudden sending him away must seem. And as language, as English was something that was very new and amorphous at the time, not so much new as it was just growing all the time, the person setting the type would then go, okay, well, I think that's T-H-E-E-S-E for this, and then sudden would be S-U-D-D, whatever. And so a lot of times it was exactly the right word. Sometimes it was something wrong because they maybe don't know language. The other thing is in that first folio we see that a lot of the F symbols are actually S's. So, something, I can't think, I can picture it, but I can't think of exactly what it would say right now. But so it might look, all the world's a stage would look like all the world's a, and then it might look like an F for stage. So anyway, that's that piece. And then from there have been many subsequent translations and people trying to take all of that and then create. So that's how the language has changed. And then each time somebody takes that language, they're imposing their own ideas as to, okay, this word is now T-H-I-S, or maybe it's T-H-E-S-E, or, so it's changing, and also they're trying to work with the meter. Anyway, all of that combined informs the theme, not the themes of the play, but informs the language and all of that. So, it's very complex. I think it's impossible to kind of boil down to one.
No, just do it.
Kernel.
Just one.
Just one. All the world is a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays several parts, his acts being the 7 stages. So I think it all boils down to that. You know why? Because that's the thing that people know the most.
It's true.
And to be or not to be.
Almost like Spanish soap operas. You don't have to know the words, you just have to know the
I've never seen a Spanish soap opera.
Oh, you have to watch them. You have to be home at the right time of day, on the right channel. Yeah, it's an experience.
It is an experience. I think, it sounds like it. I don't have TV, but it does sound great. I'll come to your house.
Yeah. Eat popcorn, watch Spanish soap operas. It'd be great.
Sounds good. What's really cool about Henry V, although it's seen in a lot of the other plays, is that it is, it pulls directly from a lot of the Greek tradition. So Shakespeare wrote in the Renaissance. Renaissance literally means to relight or rebirth.
Yeah.
to have an enlightenment, a re-enlightenment. And what they're referring to is having rediscovered the classics from the Greek history. So Plato, Sophocles, right?
Yes, Aristotle, Sophocles.
Thank you. Aristotle, made those two together.
Euripides.
Euripides.
Which I thought was
Yeah.
a policy in a clothing store. Euripides, Euripides.
Oh, no. That's so bad. So anyway, in the Greek tradition, the chorus, that's where we get the comedy and tragedy masks. The Greek chorus was a group of men, could be many, and they all had different masks, and they literally spoke kind of in song, in unison, and they were the ones that were really pushing the story along, telling what was going on. So what's interesting about this is that the prologue, the chorus, is literally listed as the chorus because he or she tells the story. So the prologue for Henry V is kind of how I would like to have my whole life summed up as, oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, because he was Mars was the god of war. And at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. You know, I love this, but this is not the right speech. I love that speech, but that's not the right one. Oh, I do have a funny anecdote, though. Okay, so here's my funny anecdote. So Shakespeare was married to a woman named Anne Hathaway, not the one from Les Mis. He was married to a different Anne Hathaway, who was 8 years his senior. So she was 8 years older, which is pretty considerable in any situation, particularly then. And I will just say this, that they were married within 9 months.
Yep.
There's something that has to happen, which is that you had to have your marriage written, like they called it banns or whatever, and you had to have it announced in church 3 times. Not on the same day. It wasn't like a ritual where you walk around the hoopah 3 times, but it was like, you had to have it announced. Maybe, I don't know if all 3 had to be within the last month, but anyway, you had to have 3. Well, they didn't make it to 3 before they got married. And they did have a beautiful daughter about 9 months afterwards. And then he had twins. I'm sorry, he had twins after that. A boy and a girl. He had a girl, and then he had fraternal twins.
Okay.
And the boy's name was Hamnet, Hamnet. And Hamnet drowned as a child or a young, I think it was a child. Anyway, it's long sort of speculated that Hamlet, all of that contemplation about death and do I live or do I die, do I stay here, the pain and all of that darkness is possibly attributed to his own grief at having lost his son. No, because if you think about if you go back with that piece of knowledge, and of course this is not to take away from any creativity or channeling or influence or any of that, but certainly our own internal emotions as artists come out in us. And if you go back and you read the text and you read the things that Hamlet is saying and you read the anguish and the turmoil that's going on, and if you read it with an eye to the idea that maybe this was about a father trying to reconcile the loss of his child, and I'm totally adding this on, but the fact that he wasn't living there because they were in Stratford-on-Avon, he was in London, and I don't have any understanding as to whether or not he was not able to go back, but I don't think he was there at the time. So, I mean, you throw all that on, especially, you can't really do that as an actor, but as reading it, it's very interesting because I think the language really supports that pain.
Wow. And
to piggyback to that whole conversation where I pretty much shot you down and said that there are no themes, that you can't boil Shakespeare down into one theme, although I still think that's true. But of course, some of the main themes that are in all art and literature would be, of course, love and death and birth and loss and jealousy, you know, all of those sort of human emotions. Well, one thing that is kind of special about As You Like It, Act 2, Scene 7, I wish I
Line
memorized. Yeah.
140.
139. That in the All the World's a Stage monologue, it encompasses not all of those feelings, but certainly the scope of a human's life. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why that is so iconic. Much like To Be or Not to Be is iconic because, first of all, it's great for marketing. It's very easy. I was in a...
That would be in the trailer. If he had written it as a movie.
It'd be in the trailer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be. So I have to tell you another little funny tangent, and I promise I'll wrap this up. When I was in college...
Brevity is the soul of wit.
I have no brevity. I have no soul.
I have half wit.
Okay, and you're a half-wit.
Yeah.
So when I was in college, I was very close to minoring in anthropology. I had a major in performance, classical performance, and then I was so close to having a minor in anthropology. And the only reason I didn't is because I really wanted to graduate. I just didn't want to have any more. But I really loved it. So there was a period of time when from way before dawn till way after night fell, I was in rehearsals, in class, in studio, in rehearsal, you know, all through the day. And the only thing I had, the only beacon of light outside the theater department was my anthropology class, which I loved. And I went to anthropology on this day when I had rehearsed a scene. For Shakespeare, I had worked with, we had a guest from the Royal Shakespeare Company we were working with, and then I don't remember what I was doing, this Shakespeare rehearsing Comedy of Errors at night, and I went to my anthropology class, and they put up on the projector this cow, and the idea we were studying cloning. And it said, to clone or not to clone. And I got my books, and I left. I was like, are you kidding me? I mean, it was literally, I was hit with To Be or Not to Be all day long.
Yeah.
To be an anthropology minor or not to be, and I chose not to be.
Yeah. It's a huge monologue about deciding something.
It is, it
You
is.
can
It's
use it for any
deciding, it
decision.
is. It's deciding whether to live or die. It's deciding whether to live and perpetuate insanity or whether to let yourself actually become, go insane, let your sanity go. Sanity was a big deal for them as it is for us.
Mm-hmm.
So it did not have sense. But that speech is not as contemplative. It's certainly not as sardonic as,
It's observational comedy.
it's observational comedy. And it's done quickly. It's all, hey, all the world's a stage, and then all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. His act's made in 7 stages, and now I am so intelligent, I'm going to tell you all of them. And to be very witty and funny at the end. Yeah, as opposed to the way we do it, certainly
The way you just did it.
the melancholic way that I just did it. Sans teeth, sans eyes. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste,
Sans serif.
Sanskrit.
Sans Onofre.
Like the hour, sands like the hourglass, so are the days of our lives. Like the sands in the hourglass, all the world is a stage, and so adieu. To you,
That's-
adieu, adieu.
Probably the most terrible play on Shakespeare ever.
Oh, I could be much worse than that.
Oh, yeah.